Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you some of the steps that I take to paint a beautiful botanical painting. I'll walk you through some of the methods that I use to create a beautiful painting of some clary sage, which is a flowering herb. So if you've ever been curious about starting to botanical paint or my specific botanical painting methods, keep on watching. So I start off by doing some basic wet on wet washes when I'm starting all of my botanical paintings, and that means I wet the paper first with clean water, as I'm doing right now, and I dab my brush a fair amount just to make sure I'm getting the right consistency of water on the paper so it's not super wet and puddly, but I'm also getting a nice even moist layer over the area that I am painting. And now I'm dropping in the beautiful purple color that I've mixed up for the clary sage flowers. And something that's really important is that I do not drop color in to cover the entire area. Even if the picture looks like it's a solid color, I usually leave some highlights, and color variation and highlights are what are going to make your painting look more realistic and bring it to life and give it that almost glowing look. Now what I'm doing is using my Kneaded Eraser as I move on to other areas that I am going to paint. I use the Kneaded Eraser to dab up any extra graphite from my pencil and lighten the lines so that you can't see the pencil lines once I've painted over them, because that's a lot harder to remove. So I just lighten it up, and now I'm doing the same thing again where I lay in that nice wet wash. And it's a fairly small area because these are small flowers, so I wouldn't recommend this as a beginner project. This video is just to demonstrate sort of how I go through some of the steps for botanical painting. I have online classes on Skillshare.com where I demonstrate botanical painting on a much easier project, which is a pink camellia flower. And believe it or not, it's usually a lot easier to paint larger flowers than it is smaller flowers, because you need to sort of pack in the same amount of definition and contrast and details into a very small area compared to a large area, which is easier to work in and more forgiving. So now I'm working on the sepals of the flower, which is sort of the sheath that holds the flower, the outside covering of it. It's sometimes called the calyx as well. And this is a slightly different tone of purple. I believe I used some perylene violet in there, and probably some ultramarine and permanent rose. And then I've just moved over to the stem as well, and you can see that the stem is quite light, and sage offers a bit of a challenge sometimes because you need to get mixes of nice fresh herb green as well as some silvery gray tones as well. And so you actually need to mix up a soft transparent gray color and add little hints of green to it to get that effect. Now I'm moving on to the upper flowers, and as you can see, I've worked on the bottom flowers and then I've skipped all the way up to the top, and that's because I just want to keep my hand away from the bottom while it's drying and not paint right next to it so I don't have any colors run into each other. In this painting, it looks like I'm working fairly dry, but I am actually using some water, but not as much as I would perhaps for the larger flowers, just because you do need more control when you're working in smaller spaces, and you have more control in watercolor when you use less water in your washes. And as I mentioned before, if you're interested in learning more about botanical painting and maybe starting off on an easier project, I have full-length classes on Skillshare.com, and you can sign up down below. I'm going to leave the referral link, and you can click on that and get 2 months free on Skillshare, access to all of my classes plus other botanical painters and other artists' classes as well. It's a great site. It's kind of like Netflix but for creative learning. So make sure you stop by and check that out, and feel free to ask me any questions as well. So here I'm starting to add in some little bits of green in and amongst the flowers, and those are for little buds and areas that haven't quite bloomed yet. And so I'm just adding a light wash of a soft green color, again wetting the paper first and then laying in the wet wash, and then I kind of blend the color around as well as lifting bits of highlights out at the same time. And making sure that when I move to the next spot that it's not right beside where I had just worked, so it doesn't run together. So here you can see that I'm laying in more of that main flower color, which is the same sort of purple I've been using all over the other flowers. Now that I have some of the other flowers painted and dried, you can see how much darker it looks when I'm dropping the color in wet compared to when it's completely dry. And as you become more experienced with watercolor painting and botanical painting in general, you'll know to to mix your colors a bit darker than you'd want them to be once they're dry, and then if they're still not dark enough, then you can go over and add more layers to the painting until you get the right tone. And you can see that I'm just like blending a little bit with the tip of my brush there and then lifting out color to create highlight and dimension as well. Okay, so now we've moved along in the process. I didn't actually film every minute of this painting. I wasn't planning at the time to make it into like a full-length class. I was just taking some clips, and this was a painting I did for an illustration commission for a natural body product line. So this illustration is actually going to be on some of their packaging. So I was just taking some clips to capture a bit of the process. Again, my online classes show the entire painting from start to finish, but it's an interesting transition to see it go from the first layers to where I am now, which is more in the final stages of the painting, and I'm working on adding little details on the petals and flowers and adding darker, more concentrated color to create more contrast and show those folds in the petals and the little crevices where the flowers join the stem. And those tiny little details can make a really big difference in botanical painting, and they kind of make the difference between having sort of a more painterly style flower painting to a more realistic botanical style painting. So now I am working on the leaves, and these leaves are really soft and velvety in real life. They're smooth, they have a curve to the edge often, and they've got almost like a bit of a hairy texture to them. So what I've been doing to add in more of that velvety detail is kind of dry brushing on some stippling almost and some texture on the edges. And then I kind of blend it out a little bit with a bit of a larger damp brush afterwards, so it's not too harsh of a mark. You can see I'm just defining the center veins there as well a little bit more. And this painting is actual size, so it's the actual size of the plant, whereas if I were to enlarge this drawing, it'd probably almost be quicker because there's more space to work in. But sometimes I like working in actual size, because then if you decide to frame the painting, it's cool to do it like in a group, like a little gallery wall with a bunch of plants that are to the actual size that they are all together on the wall. So you can see again defining the edges there more. And sometimes you do have to move quickly, because if you leave that definition too long and then don't blend it out, it'll dry and it'll be a lot harder to blend and merge into the other washes. And now I've flipped the painting upside down, and that's another reason that I don't tape my paper down to a board. I don't, for one reason, because it's usually not really wet and small enough that my paper won't buckle, and two, I like to move it around so it's easier for me to work in small details and angles. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and please like this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. I post a video every Friday, and you can also sign up for my members list on my website, lauraashtonartist.com, and I send out a free gift every single month. Thanks!